Hi, I'm Dr. Antonio Graceffo, China Economic Research, coming to you today from Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. Well, the big news this week is the China coronavirus, and we're going to be talking about the economic impacts of the virus. Now, so far, more than 9,000 people have been infected with the virus, and there have been over 200 deaths. It's very difficult to get an accurate number because the numbers are changing hour to hour, and it depends which news media you look at. But the number seems to be well over 9,000 with 200 deaths. The suspicious thing, or maybe not suspicious, but last night the WHO, the World Health Organization, declared the China coronavirus an international public health emergency, and almost immediately the numbers released by China increased dramatically, and deaths increased by about 80%. I think there were only about 130 deaths or so as of yesterday. Now there's 200 or more. The government measures the success of its economic policies by the GDP growth rate. And China's GDP growth rate is famously very high. In 2018, they achieved 6.6% growth, which is amazing when you think of the size of the Chinese economy. But due to the trade war, the Hong Kong protests, the Xinjiang papers, and a number of other factors, they closed out 2019 with only 6.1% growth. The economic value of anything is based on confidence and belief. So seeing an economy drop below a break point, for example, if the Chinese economy ever dropped below 6, would cause Chinese people to lose confidence in their own economy and in their own government, and it would cause foreign investors and traders to lose confidence in China. Since they're teetering on 6.1 and things seem to be only getting worse going into 2019, I don't like to make predictions, but it is likely or at least possible that they will drop below 6 this year. Now, the coronavirus, while you would think of that as sort of a medical problem, public health problem, not something I would be dealing with in economics. What's very important is China told the WHO about the coronavirus on December 31st. However, data has come out now saying that as of December 1st, they already had the first patient, and by December 8th, they were sure that it was coronavirus, and that throughout the month of December, public health officials in Wuhan, which is where this thing started, were already convinced that it was an epidemic. And some doctors went on social media and alerted people, and 7 or 8 doctors were detained by the authorities. They were charged with spreading rumors, and their social media posts were taken down. And then, of course, December 31, then the CCP, the Communist Party of China, they finally came forward and told the WHO about the disease. So the question now is, had those doctors been allowed to speak sooner, could lives have been saved? And if we talk about the economy dropping below 6 as being something that could hurt investor confidence, being lied to also hurts people's confidence. So now we know that China lied to us about the date that the infection was discovered. We know that they tried to silence the data. We know that they arrested doctors. These are all things that do not bode well for China's public image, China's image throughout the world, their soft power, neither for their credibility. So now every time they report to WHO or every time they release information, we are concerned that this information may not be true. And if they're lying about the coronavirus, what else are they lying about? And this, of course, carries over to things like trade agreements and economic policies. China is already facing an absolute hailstorm of PR problems. So first of all, we have the protests in Hong Kong, which have essentially ground the Hong Kong GDP down to nothing, and meanwhile are hurting cross-border trade, cross-border investment, and just making China look bad in the world. We have the Xinjiang papers. People are upset about that. It seems like Muslim people around the world are very upset to hear that China has at least 1 million, if not 1.5 million Muslims in detention in China. And as far as we know, they're being tortured. Their organs are being harvested and sold. All sorts of horrible things going on there, and that's not doing well for China's public image. Tibet suddenly resurfaced. People are interested in Tibet again. I think part of it is because we know that the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, is he's older now, and there's a chance that the secession of the Dalai Lama will have to take place soon. And China, there was a Dalai Lama that was actually identified in China. The communist authorities took that child away. Allegedly, he's being raised somewhere, and he was not told that he is the next Dalai Lama. There is speculation that he was killed. We don't know. Meanwhile, the Communist Party has identified a new Dalai Lama, which makes no sense to have the Communist Party identifying the leader of the religion. At the same time, Catholics around the world are upset with China because the Catholics in China are not allowed to recognize the Pope. The bishops and the priests are appointed by the Communist Party of China, which makes no sense. Muslims, of course, have very legitimate concerns, not just about the way Muslims are treated in general in China and about destruction of mosques and cancellation of Ramadan and all sorts of things in the past year, but also because of the Xinjiang papers. So China's taken a bunch of black eyes. There is pushback against Huawei. People do not want to use this Huawei 5G. There are cases where Chinese ambassadors have actually issued threats to countries saying, if you don't use Huawei, we're going to, punish you. Basically, you're going to have negative repercussions. Just all down the line of all kinds of problems, and then suddenly, and one more area of pushback is against the Belt and Road, China's Belt and Road Initiative, this global network of highways and financial institutions and banks and electricity and computers. In 2016, China's overseas investment increased year on year by 49.3%. In 2017, it only increased by 23%. And in 2018, it only increased by 13%. And in 2019, in the first half of 2019, it only increased by 0.1%. This means steadily since 2016, China's overseas investment has increased by a smaller and smaller and smaller amount. Pledges made to the Belt and Road are much smaller. Every year they have this big Belt and Road Summit. This year, normally Xi Jinping goes there, he speaks at the Belt and Road Summit, and he tells all the different countries in Africa and all over Asia and South Asia and Southeast Asia, and he tells them, we're going to promise you this many gazillions of dollars. And this year, the pledges were extremely modest. And just looks like the overseas investment is decreasing, particularly on the Belt and Road. And in the countries where the Belt and Road is happening, there's been a lot of pushback. So a lot of the Belt and Road projects have failed. A lot of them are standing stagnant, like there's half-built stadiums and half-built airports and half-built highways. And meanwhile, the countries that are hosting these things are now paying interest on the loans that were used to build them. And of course, they're never going to be completed, or they may be completed at some time in the future, but they're not being completed now. The original agreement was China would build it, and although the local country had to pay for it, they would benefit from increased income related to that airport or that highway or that stadium or whatever, and they would use that income to pay off the loan. Well, if the highway isn't built or the airport isn't built, if it's not completed, guess what? Or if it's sitting there empty, you're not making any money off of it, but you already have to pay off the loans. So there's been a lot of pushback on that. Around the world, there's a lot of pushback against China in general. Inside of China, under Xi Jinping, censorship, internet censorship, press censorship is at a level it has not been probably since Mao. I mean, it's extremely strict in China now. And of course, through the social credit system and a network of facial recognition cameras, essentially the government is watching every minute of everybody's life and, can control almost anything. The AI on the search engines that they use to check the social media, looking for keywords, even looking for pictures that people shouldn't be sending or that the government doesn't want them to send. This stuff is very sophisticated now. And it used to be that people could protest a bit that people could go on the social media in China and protest a bit, complain a bit. They knew that there were levels, and they kind of would go in through that. And back when they used to use, and also they would use code words. Sometimes everybody would sort of agree that there was a code word that meant the leader at that time, and they would use that name when criticizing the leader. But today, you can't get away with any of that. They will catch you. And even with that, as a result of the coronavirus, there's actually been pushback on social media and in the streets because the people know that they've been lied to. And that seems to be the case. Seems to be that in spite of government cover-ups, the people know they've been lied to, and that bothers them.